So thank you for those really fascinating and diverse presentations. I'm Julia, again, for those who came late, and I'm going to be moderating this discussion section. I have one or two questions for the panelists first, but I really am interested in hearing from the audience members, and I know there's even possibly an internet component where people who couldn't be here might be able to ask questions also of our distinguished presenters. So I'm going to start with something that may seem very, very simplistic, but it's a question I get asked all the time by my art students when I present them with work that has to do with alternative economies and artists who work outside of the conventional model of buying and selling their art, which is, how do all of you make a living? How do you support yourself?
Well, eFlux.
Mildred Lane. I lecture. I travel around like a migrant worker.
Yes, Superflex. How do we make a living, John? It's. I don't know. There's no sort of simple answer to that, unfortunately. I guess it's a variety of sources of more or less shady activities. I mean, part of it could be like you teaching. Another part is like lecturing, occasionally selling work, and being mainly, maybe that's the answer to the question would be that we do things kind of also outside, which usually involves a more sort of civilized structure of payment, like participating in architectural commissions and stuff like that.
So I still more collecting money, so in the box, and waiting for people to buy it, so to get more money. So
Great.
So I have more than like 40 boxes, so in different currency, of course. How do I live? So I live very simple, and when I was young, I earned a lot of money, so I collect a lot of money before I'm starting to do art.
Thank you.
I think Rasmus has answered the question from Superflex. I think Rasmus has answered the question on behalf of Superflex.
No.
You don't want to?
I just did.
Just eFlux, right? So my second question a little bit echoes one of the starting points that Nato led us off with, which is all of you engage on various levels with all kinds of different individuals, whether it be friends, Brazilian farmers, citizens, fellow artists. I'm wondering how you conceive of the audience for your work, or how you think of yourself as having or creating some kind of an audience or a public or a viewership.
I can make one statement. I think that as an artist or as an individual who is a part of our society, when you make a proposal or you say something, you also someone can confront you, and you have to answer. Maybe you have to be very responsible, or you can also just be radical and confrontative. So I think I lost it there. Can you tell it again?
Who's your audience, or how do you understand?
The audience is when first you make a statement somewhere, you of course also have an interest in the comment or how people perceive your work, and you can do that on many levels. Directly with the Guadalajara Power, it is straightforward. The project can continue to exist in the market when people want to consume it. Then you have to, again, see who are then the audience you can work with. And we often like to talk about our activities as tools that can work on many levels. One being a theoretical, within an arts context, but it can be hip because Superflex made it. or you hate it because Superflex made it. It can be as a product in 7-Eleven because you like that compared to another one. So I think there are many types of audiences depending on how you work. But by making a proposal, you also stand a little bit out there and you can be confronted, and that I find interesting and important.
Yeah, I like to think that thinking about the audience or what's it going to look like, the way institutions ask, that's not a critique when I say institution, by the way. When people ask what's it going to look like, who is it going to speak to, I think thinking about or trying to predetermine what the community is or what the outcome of a project is, or thinking who the audience is actually kind of regressive. I seek a more emergent community, something that's going to be a surprise. It unfolds quite organically.
If I could just add something to that, as I always kind of believed in creating the audience, that it has to be produced, it has to be educated, if you go back to the beginnings of institutions of modern art, what an incredible job they did in terms of creating the audience for this work that was largely incomprehensible for anybody else at the time. And I really feel that institutions stopped doing that. But I think as artists, we kind of have to continue this process of creating and educating new audiences, new publics.
And hopefully that's emergent.
So my audience is almost like family, and most of the time it's different ages, almost kids or grandmom, or the people who are not interested in art. That's mostly come to my work, and we are almost working and enjoying together.
But I think maybe there's something interesting, Anton, I think it's on your website or something, where you refer to eFlux as a community of 90,000 art professionals. Is that true? Oh, okay. But it's kind of like the empire of Anton somehow, which is great. I love it, and I think you should be the king of that empire. And we are all part of it. But I think it's a little bit like it's very precise, that description, because in a way, we are all kind of producers. I don't really know one single audience. I guess they're there, but the sort of, also like NATO was describing in the beginning, this kind of passive receivership has long gone. It's already part of sort of mainstream capitalism to think that, the user is also the producer. So it's a very, I don't know, maybe Sorasis spoke about his grandmother, but maybe she's an audience, but I don't know really any audience in that sense of, the old sense of the word.
Well, what do you mean, what is the sense of the word audience for you? Do you mean more like a public? Somebody who finds their historical significance in the aesthetic experience of, or encounter with an artwork? Yeah, but that probably has something to do with the disappearance of the bourgeois subject, right? Who were this public?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's maybe where I say that it really needs to be produced or regenerated or recreated or something like that. Sorry. No, I just basically restated what I said, that I think that precise subject needs to be produced at this point because it kind of almost vanished.
I'd love to open it into questions from the audience. This audience that is literally embodied and seated in these seats, or those listening and watching on the internet.
Hi, thank you all. I wonder how you approach the idea of, I'm thinking of other structures like regulations, safety. Superflux, you guys have run up against trademark and copyright law after you made a sort of a privileged gesture in Venice. There's something within the bubble of the art world that seems where we can suspend product safety rules and sell lead toys or something. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, Sarasi, but how? That's what I worry about when I take my kids to a market and a product I don't know. How do we interact between this art world of our own choice of what we want to follow and don't, and then this larger structure where we have things imposed on us, like copyright or safety standards or zoning laws or something else that might hinder our production?
Well, I mean, like in our case with kind of getting involved with copyright infringements, which we have, the law, we were told very early on during meetings with lawyers that they didn't care if we presented this in a circus or a museum or in 7-Eleven. Copyright law penetrates everything. So in that sense, that gets very real, very fast. And by the way, products don't have freedom of speech, which was sort of an interesting statement by one of the lawyers from the company we were talking to. So, I mean, we've had to get involved with these things on a very sort of practical, real level, and also used a lot of energy and money on it. So those regulations have been enforced on us. And there's been no way out of it, no way of, claiming free speech or the sort of notion of the bourgeois art institutional safety place, because they didn't really care. So I don't really know how to do it in a good way, but I mean, if you start making things that are part of the market outside, then, I mean, it comes all by itself. I mean, there's no sort of trick. Yeah.
Do you want to follow up?
Just follow up, and of course, when you make a product that is produced by a company, it is following the safety instructions, and I think the question also implies that artists don't consider safety regulations and so on, which of course they do. They care as much as any other individual will do when you present a product. And you cannot present a product in a market, or at least we would not do it if it was not following certain regulations. But still, I think there are none of the current systems or laws, politics and so on that you should just accept or obey with. I think it's my interest at least also, and I think each of us should question these structures always, on all levels. Law is for one, it's language. It's something that evolves by case and by someone confronting another one and so on. And that's where a lot of different types of view have to enter that structure also, or else it just becomes one type of language that determines the frame that we exist in. And that is the biggest danger. So therefore you have to act and also propose.
I think we got a question over here.
Hi. First, I want to thank Julia for her first question. And I grew up in a deli. My parents had a deli. So personally, my perspective about art is not doing any of the things that you guys are doing, because I could be doing that already in a deli. In each case, it seems that you're using art as a catapult zone to do something that already exists in the world. Explain to me, if you can, why, with the exception of the people from Denmark, because I understand how that works, but explain to me how you are using the art venue as a launch pad for your vision.
I avoid the subject entirely. I think that, I don't know, I can't remember who said it, but let art go fallow here in this context for a little while, and in hopes to open up the possibilities of a new kind of terrain, a new kind of art complexity. If that makes sense.
But didn't you say, just to kind of push you a little bit on that, it did seem like you were defining how you live and notions of comportment and rethinking domesticity as your practice, right, as your art.
I think I made the mistake of defining what I've always been drawn to initially, is I'm a thing person. I'm materially, conceptually attracted to and have been brought up in the world of conceptual and installation practices. I mean, I have art degrees, so I think that that mistake in the beginning may have fogged over what I was really trying to essentially get at. And certainly I apologize because the slides, I think it only went halfway through that slideshow, and there were about 100 more slides to show to sort of push the point across, is that it's not merely within the confines of the art world as we know it, and as we abide by it unknowingly. It has its set of rules and constraints and trends and fashions. But I'm meaning just to use a life, a being, a presence is as much to do, with existing as a practice as you call yourself a carpenter, or art's a tool. It's a discipline. It's a tool. Having a craft is a great tool. The more you have, the better off you are. I think is versatility is valuable in my thinking.
Do we got another question in the audience? Oh, in the back here. Here. Am I missing people over there? All right, let's get over there.
We could.
All right. I don't want to have a side bias here.
Okay. Hi. I was interested in the fact that Nato, in his opening remarks, talked about imagining a post-capitalist world, and I wonder how each of you use your practice to imagine or enact a post-capitalist world.
Anton?
Yeah, I mean, the Time Bank project is specific. I mean, we were just laughing about this with Martha Rosler, that essentially it's a kind of a primitive form of communism, what this economic structure sets up. If it succeeds in whatever small way, that's a kind of a very direct way, because then what happens is, no matter how small this economy that we will create through Time Bank is, it will sort of put the burden of proof on the existing system to justify the fact why it's the only one and why it's the dominant one. If something else could work, then that creates quite a lot, it would have to justify itself. So, yeah.
Sarasi, do you want to?
What is the question?
The question is, how do you conceive of a post-capitalist society, or is that?
Post-capitalist society. I don't know. I just know and learn another word. Liberal communist is quite interesting. So you should find also this word, so how they use this word. But by the way, last night I saw some program on the televisions and saw about the Woodstock history. And some people, they talk about how they felt the event, that a lot of people got sick, and it was a terrible event as well. But so many people who attended become also interesting not to be a hippie. Later on, they become a part of the programmer of the Apple, so that they call digital hippie. That's also very interesting. Maybe in the next few years, we become another profession or another digital hippie again. Post-digital hippie, maybe.
Okay. Do we want to take another question here? Okay, over here. Yeah, I see.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. What I really wanted to mention is that, for example, eFlux, a few months back, if I remember correctly, published an editorial by Marion von Osten called the eFlux Journal, in search of the post-capitalist self. And there is generally a kind of promotion of this idea that certain practices actually exist right now as post-capitalist. And I'm just wondering, given precisely the history of modern art, the history of the 20th century, the big crisis that's going on now, whether instead of being post-capitalist, the practices that are described here are in fact a mode of regenerating the system. because they seem to fit. And I'm not trying to, argue in any way against them. I'm incredibly happy personally about the fact that you do what you do. But if we look at the political economy of alternative, economists, I'm just wondering, how could we understand them as, in fact, regenerating the system rather than expanding it in some ways,
Well, yeah, I just can answer very quickly. I mean, in our specific case of Julieta, as I was mentioning in my presentation, the problem of time banking is it's based on very small local structures that are kind of very difficult to implement on an international scale. And I think if there is a tangible new economic idea that could be viable for the planet, right, it has to be international. I mean, communism, the ideology was international, the international, right? So for us, it's kind of, yes, maybe it sounds completely ridiculous that here are two artists that are not economists, not politicians, not revolutionaries, that are trying to set up this thing, but again, if it works as an experiment, if it works within the cultural community, within the community of artists and curators and writers, and if it's open to anybody else to come in and participate in this kind of an economy, I think that kind of expands what you were asking about. It expands the previous alternative economies and other practices.
I see a hand way back there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Julie, do you want to, where's the question? Who are you pointing to? Yeah.
There's several hands. It's hard because it's dark. Here's one here, and then there's one way in the back.
I wonder if we could follow on, Anton, from that. I got the sense when you were making your remarks, you were suggesting something like a public sphere where issues of opposition and contention would be open to debate. It sounds very familiar. It sounds very much like James Conner's Legitimation Crisis, a book published in the early 70s, and also very much indebted to Habermas. What can you say about the flow of history and the possibility of this happening now?
Well, the reason why I brought it up is because of his comment about the empire of Iflux and all of that, and the disappearance of, or like this question about the public and whether one can produce it, one can regenerate it. It's very funny because I was sitting in precisely the same space 2 years ago having the same conversation at another conference, so it's strange how it comes back again. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there is, Habermasian notions that this public sphere could be reconstituted within media, within other sort of realms that is not based on kind of citizenry, that is not based on, nation states as they're kind of, the borders are becoming so porous. So to find this kind of national identity, it's the wrong thing to look for. But of course it affects us as artists because so much of the development of, modern and contemporary art is kind of takes its trajectory from there, from the first nation state, from the Louvre, from the first museum, from the first public of citizens that comes to see an art exhibition. So it's a very kind of important question for me, at least.
I was just wondering, since you're all working in public practice, if you could talk a little bit about ownership and both your interests as an artist and perhaps as a corporation. And, I guess the idea of like the nonprofit, which is owned by a public versus setting up a corporation or an individual ownership, and how that relates to your projects. Does that make sense?
Bjorn, do you want to? And Morgan.
We have a problem with the way that the system of ownership has evolved over time. The politics and the law behind it and the general acceptance of these systems. We call it the system of rights, and we find it important that you question these systems always, and we do that with our activities daily, and we take the confrontations that we think should be taken so we can make examples and models. So in terms of, ownership is a strange word, object that we all have to relate to every day. But I believe much more in that ideas are exchanged, values are exchanged on all levels, and they are kept open to the widest extent. I'm not against ownership, or we are not against ownership. But again, we want to discuss what ownership means in a certain time, and it doesn't mean the same as it did 100 years ago, and it will not mean the same in 100 years. So I think it's a continuous discussion and battle we need to take and not just accept.
Sorry. We're going to take a question. Check this out. We're going to take a question from our online audience. I feel like I'm on television. So from our online audience. Anyways. But Jason Sinopoli is helping us out here, monitoring the discussions. Jason, do you got a question from... Do you have a microphone? Okay, we need a microphone to you. It's coming up. But do you have one? Yeah, that's a good start.
All right. Is it possible this radical practices are generating the aspects of the system that work and creating democratic struggles around issues that do not work?
Could the question be repeated?
Is it possible these radical practices are generating new aspects of the system that work, creating democratic struggles around issues that do not work?
You started with a riddle. That's good.
It's like a Zen koan.
I know. Okay, so Zen koan to the panel.
I don't think I even really got the question.
Come on, Jason, give it a go. One more time. Let's hear it one more time. I think it's good for the audience.
Put a little soul into it.
Should we ask them to rephrase it? Is it possible that radical practices are generating the aspects of the system that work and creating democratic struggles around issues that do not work? Capitalism is not homogenous.
I think in rephrasing
that's a good statement.
It's a good question. Basically, to understand this question, I suspect what it's saying is, just because you've got a production of culture, you produce this alternative market, if you will, that is working within the system under this kind of set of criteria that you evaluate for yourself. Is it possible that the effect or affect of these kind of projects are in fact producing not social justice results? That is to say that just because Guarana Power, for example, is out there doing this thing, or Time Banking, or Sarasi's project, Moses Lane, that y'all are out there producing these alternative markets, but ultimately you're just playing into regressive market conditions in the end.
Nicely done.
Yeah, what's up?
Yes.
Hell, capitalism's here to stay. There's nothing we can do about it. What? Are you really seriously thinking that you're going to dismantle capitalism? Why? Well, why not reassemble the terms? Turn the tables, turn it around, screw around with it. Reassemble the terms. Take it over. Generosity is a prime place to start. Sharing ideas, doing this. Sharing generosity. There are new tools we have that are also point taken, conceptually capitalistic.
There's 1 minute remaining.
I have a question and a mic.
I see a question
so
back there.
Talk.
There's a hand.
I got a mic, so I'm going to talk. So yeah, this is sort of extending this theme. I think a lot about the notion of a threat. Like, how can this go beyond the gesture to function as a threat to power? NATO set this up with a near impossible task for her panelists, perhaps to discuss imagining a world without capitalism or an alternative to capitalism. But that was from the Zizek quote, and I don't think Zizek was necessarily talking about, he talks a lot about institutional power and about communism in an institutional sense. These practices are pretty fundamentally anti-institutional, you might suggest. So how can they function as a threat? Do you think they do? Is there a role for art in that?
I guess we'll have other people answer since we're out of time.
Can I just say one thing? It's not impossible for me
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And also, when you return, listen, I know there's a lot of seats in the middle. Can everybody try to not do the one seat in the middle game, but kind of push in? Okay, thanks.